You ever try to really get your head around what's shaping American politics and the economy right now?
Yeah, it's complex.
Especially how the experiences of, say, the working class are playing into these really big shifts we're seeing in policy.
It's definitely a crucial question and one that feels like it has, well, significant consequences for everyone.
That's exactly where we're headed today. We're going to take a deep dive into J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, that book that sparked so much debate, offered a look into the specific part of America.
Hmm.
And we're going to put it right next to the current policies being championed by Vice President Vance and President Trump. Specifically, their focus on tariffs and revitalizing American manufacturing.
So we're essentially using the book as a kind of lens to
Yeah.
understand the motivations, maybe the potential impacts of these economic strategies.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a really interesting analysis here. It's called Hillbilly Elegy Revisited,
Hmm.
J.D. Vance, Class Struggles, and the Tariff Politics of Trump's America. And that's going to be our touchstone today. So our mission, basically, is to unpack the core arguments of Hillbilly Elegy, see how they connect or seem to connect to the real-world policy decisions coming out of the Trump-Vance administration.
And then look at the effects, the debates.
Yeah, exactly. The potential effects and the ongoing debates surrounding these actions. Okay, so Hillbilly Elegy, this was written by J.D. Vance, before he was in office. It offered a pretty raw look at a particular segment of society, didn't it? What did it really show us?
Well, the book provided a very intimate, very detailed portrait of the white lower working class, primarily those living in the Appalachian Rust Belt.
Right.
Vance didn't really shy away from the difficult realities they faced. The economic devastation after industry decline, the social problems woven into that poverty, domestic instability, the opioid crisis,
Big ones.
and the significant cultural shifts that sort of went along with all these hardships.
And it really seemed to hit a nerve during the 2016 election cycle, didn't it? People were looking to it, trying to understand the motivations of Trump supporters, that non-college blue-collar group.
Precisely. And Vance, having, come from that world himself and then gone on to Yale Law School, he offered this unique insider perspective.
Yeah.
It was his personal story, sure, a story of upward mobility, but it also, I think, illuminated the systemic barriers and challenges faced by a much larger community.
So his journey became kind of a symbol.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how his individual journey became a touchstone, really, for understanding a wider societal phenomenon.
So the book essentially gave a voice, maybe a human dimension, to a group that perhaps felt overlooked or misunderstood.
Exactly. It painted a picture of the hillbillies, as Vance called them, as a group that had once been, central to America's industrial power.
Right, the engine room.
But had become increasingly marginalized. Globalization was a big part of that, and that led to this complex web of social and economic difficulties.
Now, this analysis we're looking at points out that the book wasn't, let's say, universally embraced. There were some pretty significant contrasting viewpoints.
Oh, yes. Definitely. Supporters of the book often felt that Vance effectively identified the deep-seated structural reasons behind the persistent poverty cycles in the Rust Belt.
How so?
They saw him skillfully connecting personal experiences with these broader societal forces and doing it in a very impactful way.
But there was another side to that story, wasn't there? A critical view.
Absolutely. Critics argued that the book placed perhaps too much emphasis on individual behaviors, cultural attributes of the hillbilly class, as he put it,
And potentially overlooking?
overlooking the larger systemic inequalities at play. Some critics even voiced concerns that it inadvertently blamed the victims of these huge economic shifts, and maybe could be interpreted as supporting a more hands-off, free market approach, what some critics called a kind of neoliberal agenda, favoring deregulation and less government intervention.
So a book that definitely stirred things up. Lots of different reactions.
It certainly did. But, regardless of these varying interpretations, the analysis we're using makes a strong case that Hillbilly Elegy undeniably shaped how many people understood the political base that, well, propelled Trump to victory in 2016.
Okay. Now let's delve into how this analysis connects the book to the decline of American manufacturing. Because Vance touches on this throughout his narrative, doesn't he? It's sort of in the background.
He does, yeah, and it's a crucial undercurrent in the book. He repeatedly mentions factories shutting down, jobs just disappearing from communities, and the erosion of the social fabric that followed.
That's the backdrop.
It's this backdrop of industrial decline that profoundly shapes the lives and experiences he's describing. It's not just personal stories in a vacuum.
And the analysis gives us some important historical context for this decline. When did we really start to see this shift, this big change, take hold?
The significant turning point really began in the late 1970s. That's when globalization started gaining serious momentum.
Right.
American companies increasingly looked to outsourcing production, moving it overseas as a primary strategy to drastically cut labor costs and, well, boost their profit margins.
And the scale of that shift is quite dramatic when you look at the numbers, isn't it?
It is huge. Between about 1980 and 2020, the United States saw a loss of roughly 6 million manufacturing jobs, dropped from a peak of around 20 million down to about 14 million.
Wow.
And just like Hillbilly Elegy shows so poignantly, states in the traditional industrial heartland, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they were hit disproportionately hard.
The centers of coal, steel, auto industries.
Exactly. Those were the places that really felt it.
And the primary driver was that big difference in labor costs. Is that the main thing?
Precisely. That was a huge factor. Back in the 1970s, labor costs in countries like China and Mexico were, believe it or not, only about a tenth of what they were in the U.S.
A tenth?
Yeah. So that created this incredibly powerful economic incentive for companies to just pick up and relocate their production facilities.
But it wasn't solely about cheaper labor, was it? The analysis points to other important shifts in U.S. economic policy, too.
That's right. It's more complex. In the post-World War II era, the U.S. economy increasingly shifted its focus, moved towards service industries, technological innovation.
Right.
Manufacturing gradually became less of a central priority in national economic strategies. We also saw the rise of what are called asset-light companies.
Asset-light. What does that mean exactly?
Basically, companies that prioritize their core stuff, maybe design, marketing, and outsource things like the actual making of the product, so they don't invest heavily in physical factories and equipment themselves.
Oh, okay.
And this meant capital, money, was often directed towards sectors like real estate or finance instead of reinvesting in manufacturing infrastructure here.
And technology. Automation and the need for different skills must have played a role, too.
Absolutely. A big one. As manufacturing processes became more automated, more technology-driven, the demand for workers with higher-level technical skills shot up.
And the existing workforce.
Unfortunately, a significant portion of the existing workforce just didn't have the necessary training or education to adapt quickly. This skills gap actually contributed to a near doubling of manufacturing job vacancy rates between 2001 and 2017. Lots of open jobs, but not the right skills.
Plus, people weren't moving around as much to find work, right?
It's another critical factor, yeah.
Huh.
The decline in cross-regional migration, it just made it considerably harder for displaced manufacturing workers to pack up and find new opportunities in other parts of the country where different industries might have been growing.
And then you layer on things like trade agreements. NAFTA comes up a lot.
Those neoliberal policies, the liberalization of trade through agreements like NAFTA, they're widely seen as having further accelerated the decline of U.S. manufacturing, made it even easier, even more cost-effective for companies to move operations outside the U.S.
So it was really a perfect storm, a whole confluence of interconnected factors leading to this huge erosion of American manufacturing.
Pretty much, yeah.
And as Hillbilly Elegy just vividly portrays, the consequences were deeply felt in communities all across the Rust Belt.
Indeed. The analysis points to a really sustained period of economic recession in the Midwest, the Rust Belt, characterized by lower GDP growth rates, higher unemployment rates compared to the national average. And this started back in the 1980s and just continued. It wasn't just a short blip.
And the social fallout, that must have been significant and really long-lasting.
Tragically so. The economic stagnation directly fed into a worsening of social problems, rising poverty rates, crime, and of course the devastating opioid epidemic. All things Vance depicts powerfully in his book.
Yeah.
There's a particularly stark quote in the analysis we read. Drugs have become the only economic growth point in the working class communities in the Rust Belt.
Wow. That's bleak.
It paints a truly bleak picture of the social costs, yeah.
It also sounds like it hit the very idea of upward mobility hard, the whole American dream concept.
Yeah. Absolutely. Fundamentally, the likelihood of a child born into a working-class family in America actually moving up the economic ladder, it's significantly decreased in recent decades.
Oh my.
Dropped from